Welcome. My name is John Galloway. I'm going to be talking to you for the next 75 minutes about modernizing .NET apps. This is something kind of near and dear to my heart. I've been a .NET dev since .NET came around, and I worked in industry before joining Microsoft for over 10 years, and worked in a lot of maintenance, and I see the pain. So I've also been the one out there saying like, web forms are awesome, come use web forms, and then like, okay, now what do we do, you know? So how many folks here are mostly focused on updating, say, like .NET Framework apps? Cool, yep. And how many of those are like mostly, let's start with web forms, one of the harder problems. Web forms, okay, cool, we'll talk about that a bit. What about like MVC APIs? Okay, cool. What about desktop apps? All right, we got all the ones. Cool, all right, well, I'm not going to solve all your problems in 75 minutes, but I can hopefully give you some pointers. I know, right? Walk out. But I can give you some pointers, get you started, and we'll have some time to answer some questions. So I'll start with sort of obvious stuff. Like you're all here, you want to update. So this is more about how to sell your boss kind of stuff, right? But why update? Okay, so performance is important. A lot of the time, like obviously moving off of framework to modern .NET, you see huge bumps. But even between moving from, say, .NET 9 to .NET 10, big bumps, big improvements in performance, big memory improvements, like better CPU utilization, et cetera. I was just talking to someone at lunch today about this. Modernizing and updating doesn't have to necessarily be super tough. Like for instance, today I was messing with an app that wasn't working. I had code in .NET Framework 3.5. I wanted to see it in .NET Framework 4.8. For this one, there were no package dependencies or whatever. I bumped the version number in my CS proj, and that worked. I know you've got more complicated things. I'm just saying, like say for instance, in more modern things, super modern, moving .NET 9 to .NET 10, you have a pretty good chance, like good Vegas odds, of going into your project file and bumping 9.0 to 10.0 and running your app, okay? So, and just doing that without doing, like you'll see all these things, what's new, all these big features, all this stuff, right? You don't have to use any of that to have right here performance improvements. That is a solid win. You change one character in your entire project from a 9 to a 10, debatably 2 characters, right? But you change that to a 10 and your app runs faster, right? So performance, cool. Security fixes, important, obviously, especially in modern connected applications, like everything gets hacked and broken, especially now worrying with AI getting in the mix as far as like vulnerability finding. That is super terrifying. So you want to get your security fixes. New features and tooling, of course. Compliance support, community and ecosystem, a big thing and often overlooked. So this includes, of course, like the NuGet packages, the hip, cool new packages you hear about, you want to be able to use them. But also this includes things like components. And it's kind of scary. I talk to people all the time. I know there's a lot here that are locked in by not necessarily open source packages or whatever, but components, and your component vendor is not updating, right? So there's real kind of incentive to keep modern from that point of view. Okay, of course, .NET 10 out in November, tons of cool new stuff. It's C#14, the performance, blah, 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 blah. Like I said, moving just from .NET 8, one LTS to .NET 10, huge improvements in, say, API performance for working set and requests per second. And this again, literally going in, changing your project file from .NET 8 to .NET 10, you get that version bump. Why am I telling you all this? Just because I know when you go to conferences like this, you hear people talking about all this fancy new stuff, right? All these cool new features, what's new in AI and all that. And a lot of the time in the back of your mind, you're thinking, neat, I can't use a lot of this, right? Because you're locked in. So I've been like making it a mission to try and speak at conferences like this and make this important. C#14, cool new features, right? Tons of, like just clean up and simplify your code. A neat kind of thing that you may not know of is you can actually, in your CS proj file, you can say, you want to use newer C# features. And in most cases, you can do that. Even in .NET Framework apps, you can use newer, I forget what the name of the attribute is, but it's a change in your project file. So you can change your C# code, features. So, but unlocking all these new features, definitely simplifies your code as well. New patterns, this includes stuff like better DI, better things for logging, just a lot of kind of like modern .NET, especially moving framework to core and modern .NET, you get a lot of things that are kind of solve problems that were harder to solve, more testable, that sort of stuff. So two other big things here, attract and retain talent. Easy for me to say. It's harder to hire people that want to work on framework apps, right? It's harder to keep people in jobs if they're working on older stuff. And then just general cost. There is a trade-off where year after year, it's pretty cheap to just keep things running. But over time, that's debt, right? And that cost really kind of builds up, and you have to pay it at some point. I was in the middle of making a point, I kind of forgot what it was. I think it just generally like, a lot of these things, and it's generally like, it gets frustrating to hear people talk about it. What I was saying is, I'm seeing at Microsoft that this is becoming a priority now, because they're seeing, hey, folks, there's a lot of folks in enterprise, large important customers that cannot, and all of our customers that can't use like Azure, can't use Copilot, can't use some of these newer things because they're struggling maintaining older apps. And so that is something that I'm really happy to see is becoming more of a priority at Microsoft too. General kind of flow on modernizing, you're gonna assess before you go into it. You're gonna see, what do I have to do? You're gonna do your general version bumps, right? You're gonna just bump up your framework and that sort of stuff. Then, once you have a modernized core base, or code base, then you have opportunities to do things like migrate to the cloud as well. So there are a lot of things where, yes, you can run things in the cloud with older code, but it's a lot easier to break things into microservices, to run on modern, lightweight, scalable patterns in the cloud. Some of the supported out-of-the-box things, don't worry, because I'll talk more about some of the other ones, but like your classic, like your ASP.NET Core stuff. So this is, if you're already in ASP.NET Core, those version bumps are relatively easy. Blazor, of course, not super tough. Azure Functions, surprisingly, a little bit tougher than you'd think, right? If you've actually updated from old Azure Functions to newer Azure Functions, they change things around with the new isolated model, and it's kind of a pain. Fortunately, right-click, modernize, like that sort of stuff is now supported in the tooling. So that'll save you some time. WPF and WinForms. This is something a lot of people don't think about, but actually modernizing WinForms is super easy in a lot of cases. Most of the time, it's locked in by your components. But if your components are going to support it, updating a WinForms app gives you a much faster app, unlocks a lot of things, and is like relatively fast, like a kind of a version bump sort of thing. Class libraries and console apps. Okay, I'm going to start with the Copilot modernization thing. How many people here cannot use Copilot in their business, in their work? There's more than that aren't raising their hand very high. Yeah, okay. So that is fewer hands than I've seen in the past. This is a tough problem because Microsoft's just saying, like, just use Copilot. And I talked to a lot of people and they're like, I can't because we need a corporate policy. There's concerns about, code being transmitted to the cloud, all that sort of stuff. Over time, I think that is naturally just going to kind of have to, like, companies are getting around to figuring this out. But this is, so I'm going to mention this is the main thing we're going to talk about, but I'll talk about some workarounds towards the end. The older Upgrade Assistant and some of the older tools we showed were based on patterns that we had seen. So we have consulting folks inside of Microsoft that are super smart, that understand both the weird internals of why we did things and how things are set up with .NET framework 3.5, but then they also know the newest, greatest features in .NET 11 Preview 2. Like, I don't know how they fit all that stuff in their head, because I learned a lot of the older framework stuff, and it's kind of dribbled out as I've learned the newer stuff, right? I struggle so hard getting my demos set up, and I'm like, how do I run this framework stuff again? And it's frustrating. So anyways, over time, we learned these patterns where we said, here's the steps on updating our, you've got to change your program or project file into SDK style. You've got to update your NuGet packages. These are how dependencies work and stuff like that. So over time, they started writing these scripts and programs, turned it into a CLI tool, and then over time, they turned that into Upgrade Assistant. And the way that worked is you right-click on a project, you say upgrade, and it went through and got you 75% of the way there, sometimes less, sometimes more. It depends how close your project was to file new, right? But it would get you at least started, but it wouldn't finish the job because there's just weird stuff. Every application has slightly different things. There's weird things about mapping your static assets and just changing things around. So the newer updated way that we recommend that really does work a lot more smoothly is the GitHub Copilot app modernization system. So the way this works is it goes through those steps that I showed you before. It assesses, creates a plan, figures out, works through systematically. It's restartable, so you can stop your work, go home for the day, come back the next day and say, let's continue, that sort of thing. What's nice about this is it integrates the kind of workflow that we've seen with the whole plan and that sort of thing with Copilot being able to say, oops, this didn't compile. Let me fix that for you. So that's kind of the main thing, and we're going to jump into doing that real quick. This is MVC Music Store. Now, in classic John fashion, I went through, tested this all out beforehand, ran through most of the upgrade, yes, this is working, but the act of doing that destabilized my environment, and now when I try and run it, it doesn't build. Hopefully that gives me an opportunity to show you something that's actually kind of cool with this Copilot modernization, which is that you don't actually have to get your app building in order to start modernizing it. Now, hopefully it's not jinxed me and going to prove me wrong here, but I have seen cases where I struggled with trying to modernize, couldn't get it to work, and then I would just say like, okay, I'm not even going to bother with getting it to build. What that application looks like is a blast from the past for me. This is the MVC Music Store. This was one of my first jobs when I started at Microsoft in 2009 or 10, and I actually worked directly with Scott Guthrie, and he wanted ASP.NET MVC was a new thing, and he wanted a demo app. I see some people shaking their heads there. So I was signed up to write this thing. And how scary is a code review with Scott Guthrie? Pretty scary. So anyways, this was an app that we updated over time. This is the MVC 5 version of it. It is set up in, I believe, framework, might be 3.5, might be 4.8. We'll find out. So I'm just going to start it up. I've switched. If we go in here, I'm going to zoom, and I'll try not to make you dizzy. Thank you for giving me more information. OK, so I'm going to try and go in here. So I'm going to say I've switched in these tools here, modernize. So there are these different modes. Ask is the super safe way. It is basically like chatting. It cannot edit. It can't change anything. It is just give me some advice. That is nice to use when you don't want it to change anything around. Agent is the general purpose agent mode. It'll ask for prompts. It'll say like, hey, am I allowed to do this? But you give it access and it'll start editing your code, right? But then there's the other ones that we started adding in that are special purpose. Now what's really neat here, I'm showing you a variety of things. I'm starting in Visual Studio, VS 2026. I'll also show you in VS Code and Copilot CLI some stuff later. But what's really cool with Visual Studio 2026 is it understands your project, right? So it is able to hook into the profiler. It's able to hook into the project system. It's able to run benchmarks and all that sort of stuff, right? So that's why we have like this profiler and test where you can actually go through and you can say, profile and optimize my code, and it can do stuff like that. So I'm going to use Modernize, which, by the way, why doesn't Modernize get an icon? Everybody else gets an icon. It's like, it should have like the old man like logo or something, emoji. Okay, so I'm going to say update this to .NET 10 in a new branch called VS Line, or I'll just call this update upgrade .NET. The reason I give it a branch name is otherwise it's going to invent one, and I just want to be like kind of more upfront with it. Okay, so let's see if I blew it up, in which case I'm going to have to juggle and move around my other demos, but it's going to look, now I chose GPT-5.4. Like as it's spinning things up, I just want to talk through options there. What I find is Claude is great as kind of like a professor, and it's going to kind of reason with you, and it'll think things through, and it'll be like, don't worry, and it'll kind of make jokes, and it's friendly, right? And then GPT is kind of like the old gunny sergeant that's like, sir, yes, sir, and it goes and does stuff, but like, I try and joke with it, and it just like gives me this like, you know, kind of side-eye thing. So, but it's good at like getting the work done, right? So I'm putting GPT-5.4 on the case. So it's going through, looking at my project, analyzing stuff. Now what we're gonna do with this is we're gonna turn it loose, and then we're gonna check in on it once it gets going. So I wanna make sure it's like really working, and then I do find with Modernize in this, it is like an hour-long task, and it is something where sometimes it just kind of gets stuck, and you got to say like, okay, I believe in you, keep going, and it'll keep doing the stuff. So the first thing it needs to do is it discovers and analyzes the project, understands the dependencies. This is MVC Music Store. It's an MVC application. It is a single project. It does have 2 databases. It has an identity system and a backing database for a music catalog, okay? So, so now it's going through and it's saying, hey, do you want to edit stuff? Do you want to give me permission? Now, I'm going to say my options are always allow and allow in this session. I'm going to say allow in this session. And generally, what that means is when I close down Visual Studio, it's going to take back any of those, you know, like permissions I've given it. If I say always allow, then it's just always going to just do stuff, right? And so it's going to give me a few of these, and so I'll say, always allow writes to yes, because I don't care. You can write to this temporary upgrade. So what it's going to do is create some markdown files. It's already started doing that here. So it's got this assessment, and it's saying like, here's all the different stuff. It's actually pretty comprehensive. It shows all the different stuff about, you know, binary incompatibilities. It looks up things like vulnerabilities. I'm using stuff like Modernizer and WebGrease and some things that aren't around anymore, old version of jQuery. So it goes and it's like finding all that stuff out. So step 1 is analyze everything. And so it's looking at what it needs to do for that. Next, it pops up a bunch more. You'll notice there some things break, and then it detects that it breaks, and it continues on, which is cool. So it's going to go through and and write up some markdown files, and the markdown files are things like planning. Don't show this dialogue. How can I say, no, I don't care. So now it's come up with this upgrade plan. So we'll look at this upgrade plan. This is in Markdown. And what's neat with this is an overall, this is something you can like show to your boss, share with your team, like that sort of thing. These are also Markdown for a reason. They're editable. So you can go in and you can say, that's kind of the plan, but I want you to keep this dependency, or I want you, yeah, go ahead.
So your source code, where does it go? It's not being processed locally, right?
Yeah, okay, great question. So where's your source code going? So the way this is working is it is using, it needs to communicate with cloud services in order to do this. So this is GitHub Copilot. It does not like upload your entire code base to the cloud. So the actual communications are going to be like, it's going to communicate with Copilot and it's going to ask, I need to do this, here's this. Like there's a certain context window of information it can transmit. So it's essentially chatting back and forth and saying, given this chunk of a project file, what are my NuGet packages here, or what do I need to do? So that is a really good question, and there is, I don't have the exact URL handy, but it is something like, there's like a trust page, this GitHub Trust Center, and they have information, because it's a very common question. So it talks in there about like, here's, there's FAQ, and here's what is communicated and what's not, right? There used to be concerns earlier about, and I'm sure there still are, but I hear people talking less about like, oh, they want to train on my source code. They don't need your source code, right? They've trained on all the source code they're ever going to need to see across all of open source repositories and stuff. Nobody needs your source code. So it's more about like your concerns about like, hey, our secrets or whatever going off into the cloud, right? Question?
Can't train your source code. We have ways we do things that may be different than most people. I kind of wanted to train a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. So there's two concepts there. One is training of a model like GPT-5. You don't want necessarily that, right? But you're talking about like, hey, here's how we do things at our company. That's what you put in these markdown documents, right? So when you go into the tasks or the plan, you can actually edit these and you can say, hey, we don't like unit tests, or whatever, right? Or like, hey, we always require tests for these circumstances. Our naming convention is this. So that's where you go in here and you edit that stuff. So I don't have time to like tweak and mess with that. I'll probably break my demo if I do, but that is where you do that. What's neat here is we can see we're already going through this project conversion. But here it's showing here we're at 0 of 6 tasks done, which is kind of funny. But it just goes through and keeps updating this stuff, right? What I find as I go through that, see there, it's like an internal error occurred. Okay. Do you want to continue? No. So I'm going to say here, continue. So okay. So this is real world here. Exciting stuff. Okay. So I have gotten myself in a weird state here, and I think it has to do with something about my like authentication. So I'm going to show you what I've actually done with this earlier. So if I go, step 1 is I'm going to try just close it and reopen it. Now, this is a bug and a feature. A bug because obviously it crashed, that's not good. The feature is, hey, if I want to be able to stop my work, like in the demo world, we're going to show you, hey, you're going to update your app in 1 hour. In the real world, you may get a couple hours a week to work on something like this. You may be working in a separate branch or something, or you go home at night, right? And so here, let me try. If I say continue. If this doesn't work, I have one other fallback, which is reboot. Okay, I legit did this earlier today. This is, I'm showing you like this is real world what I'm going to do if I get stuck, right? And then once we get that back going, I'm going to go back to our other scenarios and what you can do. Okay, I'm working in a, we used to call it DevBox. I think the name now is like, I forget, it's in the Windows app. Does anyone use DevBox? It's pretty cool. So the idea is it's a virtual machine I'm remoted into, right? But it's hosted on Azure. It's this whole supported thing. What's neat with it is that they're very fast, pretty high capability. It's a much beefier machine that I'm working on. It has 2 terabytes it has 64 gig of RAM, which is more than I've got. It has 16 virtual CPUs, but the most important thing is it's got a really fast Ethernet connection. So even though I'm working off Wi-Fi, it's really connected quickly to the cloud. So we'll see if this works. If it doesn't, we'll move on. I'll show you the completed case, but that's less fun. Yeah, question? What's that? Go ahead.
So I always ask specifically that you are asking to have a to be partner. Things like they have the actual story currency.
So I can't promise it won't, right? Because it's communicating. What I would recommend first thing is remove credentials from your code as much as possible, right? I do know that Microsoft does not want your credentials. GitHub doesn't want those. These aren't being stored or indexed somewhere, but just me, I don't want my credentials going to the cloud, right? Everybody, fingers crossed, gets your bets in. Is it going to work? I'm 50-50 on this because I haven't seen this error before. I just saw it today. Because it knows, it can smell my fear. Okay. All right, working on it, working on it. How are we doing? What's kind of neat with this generally is because of the way it's working, I'm going to say continue. Now, what I saw earlier is it was like, you need to log into GitHub. Yeah. I think it's actually, this isn't a modernized thing. I think this is just my login here, in which case I could go to, let's go to ask. Hello. Are you working today? Yes, okay, let's do this. I have a good feeling about this. Modernize. I type modernize, okay. This app to .NET 10 on a new branch. Okay, we'll just start it again. Okay, this time instead of GPT 5.4, it's a battle. We've got Opus 4.6. So it's starting back up. So I'm going to give it just a second while it start. Actually, I'm going to just pop back into my presentation. We'll keep going. We'll see if it works. I'm going to show you a WinForms app. Again, this is one of those things, I don't hear people talk about it as much, but this is a big win in terms of some big things you get out of modernizing a WinForms app. Number one, by going from framework to modern.NET, you can run multiple versions side by side. So that means you may have a WinForms app and you want it to run on .NET 8, but you've got another one on .NET 10, no problem, right? You can distribute them as MSIX, so you can distribute them like using basically the advantages of click once sort of thing, like really easily. They can be AOT compiled. They have accessibility and like all the modern Windows 10, Windows 11 features, right? So the WinForms team at Microsoft actually is doing all kinds of stuff. They're cranking away on building new features in. Like for instance, over the past couple of years, they added in full dark mode support, right? Just all kinds of features. So there actually is a team building stuff. This is still going, by the way. I'm not going to look at it and jinx it, but it seems happy. Okay, so let's start up another thing here, and we're going to look at a WinForms app. For this sample, I got an MSDN magazine sample published in 2009, but I believe this actually came from 2007. This is a data grid app. Again, like my other one, it worked fine, and then I started testing my app upgrade, and it didn't run, so let's see if it runs. Okay, so this is an old time, this is almost 20 years old, 2007, and this is a data grid, very simple data grid, right? So what I did with this, I'm going to show you the beginning of this, and then I'm going to jump to the kind of completed code. We'll show, let's create a new thing. We'll do modernize, update to .NET 10. I'm going to stay with Opus 4.6 because it seems a little luckier today. Again, like I said, I realize all apps are different, but what I've seen so far is a lot of WinForms apps is kind of more of a slam dunk on the update. The reason why is the web has changed so much over the years. All the dependencies, all the different packages are so different when you look 3, 5, 10 years ago versus WinForms apps. You don't necessarily the models haven't changed so much, how we do logging, dependency injection, all that kind of stuff, right? So, and it's saying like, hey, this app written, connecting to a SQL database, written in .NET Framework 3.5, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, shouldn't be a big problem. I'm going to choose confirm. It's asking about doing automatic. So I'm going to say use automatic mode #YOLO. It's funny because we actually have a switch in the Copilot CLI that's YOLO mode. So hopefully it goes for it. Okay, so it is going to go through and do that. Now, this is a version bump, but there are actually a few things changed. One is the SQL connection. This is connecting to a SQL Server database, and there's some changes in the SQL client. And it actually breaking changes, broke the namespace, some stuff like that. So it's going to go through and fix that for me. Before, when I did this upgrade, it was migration assistant, or it was upgrade assistant, and then an hour of why isn't this working, and Google and all that stuff. Now with this, we should see it basically running in 3 to 5 minutes, right? Why would I update it? Well, I mentioned some of the things about faster, better, smarter, whatever. It has opportunity to opt into dark mode, things like that. But another thing I want to point out is you can take advantage of modern features a lot more easily. So in this case, I'm using Microsoft extensions for AI. So I want to take my 20-year-old app, and the previous one was just a data grid binding to a table. What if we wanted advanced querying with an AI backend? So I went through, updated it, and I'm going to, once this updates and runs, I'll pop to something that took me, again, an hour or two of me telling Copilot to write some code. So what this does is it actually generates some SQL based on, I tell it, here's the data schema. I do some moderate, this is just this is your line of business app. This is what your boss uses to look up who's making good sales this week or whatever, right? So it's not super battle hardened for running on the internet and SQL injection, but it does do, best effort SQL injection. So this generates a SQL statement that does a more advanced query. So this is kind of an idea of here's how we could here's a reason to update to .NET 10, aside from just okay, it's updated. Step 1 is SDK. So this is always going to be your first step, no matter if you're doing it manually or automated, is you need to update your project file. The old style project files, the super long ones, right? It's got all the GUIDs. It lists every single file it's ever seen in there. It's huge XML back when we got paid by the line of XML. So now this is the modern SDK style format, and it's just it just references, it's just short and simple. So that's step 1. The next one is bump the TFM and then validate. And when it does, it does update TFM and fix, get it to build, basically. So it'll keep running it. It'll run into that issue with the SQL client. It'll say, oh, we need to do this. One thing that's neat, okay, this is a one-way upgrade. All right, let's go. So it's doing that. So here's the goodbye old project file. All right, Cloud's a lot luckier today. Let's go and see how we're doing with that music store. That's going too. So it's going to go through and do this. Then it's going to do that SQL query. And I'm trying to think of anything useful to say here. This one's pretty straightforward. So it is, and it is nice as well that you can start on something, you can share your progress, you can keep stuff in a branch. It is nice that it does work in a separate branch, right? So you can go through and every Friday is an update Friday or whatever, right? And you block off Friday afternoon. Yeah.
Is it smart enough to, like, if you're using plugins like Telered or Code One or something, is it smart enough to go get the newer, updated versions of those DLLs?
Yeah, so the question is it smart enough with like a vendor plugin, vendor component, is it smart enough to get those? Generally, yes. It's obviously going to help a lot better if it's like on NuGet, which they usually are now, right? So also you can give it information in your prompt, which I didn't there, but you can give a more detailed prompt, and you can add a steering prompt in as it goes too. So you can say like, there are multiple ways you can do this. Up front, you can say, I realize we have Telerik components. I want you to use the newest ones for this. We have a license. The installation is in this folder. You know what I mean? You can give it that info. 2 is you can give it in the markdown. So in your plan, or your assessment plan, or in your tasks, you can say, add a task in that says, bump and validate the Telerik components or whatever. Step 3 is you can add in steering. So you can, in your prompts, you can say, oh, I notice you're doing this, please do this also. That's a little bit less deterministic because it'll just kind of get to it when it gets to it. So it's like you're putting it in the queue and it may get to it, right? All right, so we've got 2 things. This is the thing that I was looking for. It found the SQL client. So it's saying like, okay, so the old school, we, for whatever reason, completely changed the name and whatever of the SQL client in .NET, going from framework to modern .NET. So it found and fixed that. Again, that is the kind of selling point for this over Upgrade Assistant, because Upgrade Assistant got me started, and then it's that 80-20 rule, right? That last 20% drove me nuts. And then a lot of the time, these super old bugs, it's like, I found it in some old forum from like 10 years ago, so it's nice that Copilot's going to go through and do that. All right, so it's going to finish doing that. We'll check in on our music store. That's still cranking along. I think I can look at my scenario instructions. I'm not even sure. It just says it's going. It's doing some stuff. I'm going to say continue. We'll see how it goes. We've got multiple bets out on the table. All right, upgrade complete. So that's cool. So now we have our app running, hopefully, in WinForms. WinForms on .NET 10. So again, this is unedited code from 2007, modernized in a few minutes, right? So now, this is the thing where Julia Childs take the cooked dinner out of the oven, right? So I'm going to say, let's hop forward in time. I'm going to, let's commit this stuff, I guess. Oh, it's not even that much, because I just did that. I'm going to just stash it. Okay, so we're going to go to my other branch. So we'll say stash changes. So this is my other example where we've got some AI queries in there. So in this, here's our main form. Come on. All right. So I've added in just a little stuff where it reads, I'm using GitHub models. I'm setting an endpoint. I'm doing some stuff. This is actually kind of fun code where before all it did was a simple query. And what I wanted to do now is I said, I've got some more advanced sample queries we'll look at in a second. And then this is my prompt here as I say, hey, you are a SQL expert. You convert natural language questions into SQL queries. Return only a SQL query. Don't explain it. Don't put it in Markdown. Don't say thank you for your question, any of that stuff, right? And then I have a little bit of stuff in there that strips out things like it only allows select queries and that sort of thing. Then the one other kind of interesting thing is I need to give it the schema, right? I originally was putting it all in a big select statement and all this, and it was like really long. And I'm like, its job is to parse this stuff, right? So I just said, here's the tables. Here's the orders table. It has these columns, blah, blah, blah. Okay? So let's run it. And of course, there's build errors. Thank you. Okay. All right, let's see about this. Fix. Oh, I need to clean, I think, because of clean. And then build. Fix this. Fix this broken build. So this is, of course, part of the fun of like I'm demoing a lot of super old code, moving to the latest and greatest stuff using the latest and greatest tools. So we're going to get, I think we're like looking at about a 50% success rate, which I'll take that. This is still going, and here basically it says 2 tests are done, but it's not really doing anything. So I'm just going to hit stop and continue. Sometimes that seems to like wake it up or make it go like, oh yeah, I was doing a thing, right? So, all right, so that's our MVC. I still have my money on WinForms today. It's doing that, build successful. Okay. Now it says it's working. Which, by the way, I really encourage that generally for all sorts of like, I use that now if my Git circumstances are screwed up, right? I'm like, figure out what's going on my Git branch because I can't commit or whatever, right? You know, I mean, yes, I can totally do that, but why? Like I use Copilot a lot of the time now for things like, I use FFmpeg all the time for re-encoding video or image magic, right? And all the command line switches are little, I always forget them and look them up, and I have a OneNote with all these things. Now I just say like image magic or, Copilot, convert this file to WebM, make sure it's under 1.5 megabytes, go, and it just does it, right? So I set this up and it's got a bunch of things. Top employees by sales, monthly trends. Some of these things are a little bit, so this one is a complex query kind of. Find employees with declining monthly average sales from 97 to 98, because that's when this database is from. So I hit AI search. It's going and generating the SQL. It's going to pop up a message box with the SQL for that, right? So this is my query. That is some SQL I would not want to have to write, right? So, but it's just joining and, sub-selects and stuff. Okay. So there, Nancy, I'm disappointed. Okay, so and then it can also, I can say, find most popular products in March, right? I can, so it'll go through, like, so this is a full, so this is the example here of taking 20-year-old code, modernizing it. You saw that we updated it to .NET 10 in a matter of 5-10 minutes. Then I hacked around and added in Microsoft extensions for AI and added in this pretty cool query thing. So this is more than just, oh, it's compatible or it's, I've crossed a thing off the list. We're adding real useful features into an older app, right? We've got one success. We've got one, I'm not betting on the MVC one. I think continue the update. So this is a nice thing where it's got the markdown files, and it also can just check the state, and it also can check the files on the Git. Because it's working in a new branch, it's able to kind of understand the state of what's going on, right? Okay, so what about web forms? So the official tools don't say they support web forms. There's 2 answers to this. One is, I gave a presentation at Ignite back in November where I kind of hacked it to do this. I basically told Copilot, I want you to, there's this thing called, there's a thing called YARP, which is yet another reverse proxy. And it's a way to kind of proxy information back to another endpoint. So the idea is you're unlikely to, or it's very likely that a web forms app, you're not going to upgrade in an afternoon, right? Or in an hour or 2. Because you've got a real business that you're running, people are actually using the app. You've got to do side-by-side upgrades over time, right? So what we recommend for this is it's an established pattern in computer science. It's called the Strangler Fig pattern. This is Martin Fowler's written about this. The idea is basically, it's based on this thing in nature where a strangler fig, basically, like an old rotting out tree, a strangler fig will kind of just take that tree over. It'll grow up over it from the outside, and then basically the tree rots away, and then what's left is this strangler fig, something like that. But so the idea is that you want to you want to basically build on top of the old one, and then the hollowed out thing, you just remove it, right? So the idea of this is to work at a unit of work. So what we're doing is proxying at the beginning. Every request comes into our new app. It's a new Blazor app. So we recommend using Blazor when you're moving from web forms to modern.NET. Blazor is component-based, as is web forms. And so it's just kind of a more natural fit than trying to move to like MVC or something else, right? So working at the unit of work, you want to work at the kind of page level, the URL level. And so you can, using a proxy, you can rewrite one page at a time. So when you originally create your Blazor app, the way that works is everything comes in. So here's your initial app. So I actually wrote this wrong. That should say ASP.NET Framework application. So external, everything's coming into your app, which is working Office and Business Logic. Then we create a front end. So we've got this, all the traffic is still routed through our, it's getting to our ASP.NET app. Let me say that again cogently. All the traffic comes into an app that does nothing. This ASP.NET Core app, all it does is proxy everything using YARP, yet another reverse proxy. This is something that Microsoft wrote. We use it internally at scale, and we've also worked with large customers that use it. So it is code, it is middleware that runs in your modern application and has mapping in it. The mapping can be an JSON file or it can be in code. It can say user regex, whatever. Everything that is in the admin, proxy it back. Everything that's in the front end will handle, right? So everything initially is proxied through to your old app. Well, so basically over time, you just migrate stuff. You say, I'm going to, this week we're going to rewrite the admin page. This week we're going to rewrite the front page of the app. And what's neat with YARP is it basically says, if I can handle this URL in my app, I'm going to take it. Otherwise, fall back to the old web forms app. Did that kind of make sense? So request comes in from the internet, comes into my new app. My new app, I have just rewritten the home page. That's it. And so the request is for the home page. Awesome. I handle the response and I send it back to the user. Next request comes in. That is to log in. Well, I haven't built that part yet. So that falls back to the web forms app. And the web forms app handles that response, and then it's just proxied back to the user. All the requests and responses are coming through my modern Blazor app. And so from the point of view of like all the browser kind of internals and everything, it's all coming back and forth from one application. So that is a way to do an incremental migration over time, and that's a pretty good pattern. So now we've got, that's kind of the general pattern we want to work with, but where do we get these components? What I recommend for this is Blazor Web Forms components. Anyone heard of these? Use these? Okay, so Jeff Fritz, I've worked with him for a long time. He's at Microsoft. He built this thing out. He also speaks a lot on migration, modernization stuff. So he built out these web form components, and they are basically just complete mirror images of web forms components. So if we go in and let's look at one, so let's look at, this is a live site, right? So I can say, let's go and look at a timer, right? So here's a timer. So if we look, here is the web form equivalent. So I think I can do that. Here's my good old ASP colon, script manager and all that stuff. Up here at the top, we have our modern Blazor timer. He's got upgrade panel. He's got, accordion, right? So you can go through, here's my, fancy accordion, right? And so what's neat with this is they're pixel perfect. He's been using Playwright to do this, so it doesn't change from the user point of view. It's the exact same app. And what also is very minimal is the code change, right? So before, where we had something like let's look at a calendar extender, right? So here we've got before and after, you've got calendar extender and ASP colon, Like this one, because it's Ajax control toolkit, that one's a little more complex. If we look at something more like, here's your general calendar, right? These are complete working calendars, basic calendar, I don't know. Yep. Cool. Selection modes. Oh, that's display only. Here's single. Right? So full, implementation of the calendar, and it is basically just converting ASP colon calendar to calendar, right? So anyways, that's the idea there. He's got an entire thing built out with this, and he's got sample projects, so these show before and after. So you can see like Contoso University, Wingtip Toys, etc. So what's neat here too is if we look in the Blazor Web Form components, we'll look at the docs. And then there's a migration guide in here. That's what I'm trying to find. That's on. And so the deal with this is not like an official Microsoft product, but it is open source code that's been maintained by a lot of people like on the .NET team over years, and like over 20 contributors. It's been maintained for over 7 years. And like if we look on here, the latest update was several updates yesterday, right? So this is definitely like, moving forward. Another really cool thing about this, what I've been showing you so far is very GitHub Copilot powered. What Jeff did is he actually built out some scripts that do some standard replacement things. So it says like, hey, if I'm replacing these controls with these controls, I can do a regex find replace through your whole project, right? Or I can use PowerShell or things like that. So, so he's got an entire kind of migration system for doing that. So there's a whole like strategy document and everything to walk you through. And so anyways, that is what I recommend using there. What I was starting to explain before this is back in November, I did an example where I hand-coded stuff. And I said, hey, I want you to go through, and I was able to update one page in the app. I was able to add in a second page to the application. It's kind of neat, but like using Jeff's, like you could do the entire project, So I'll see if I have this open. It may be if I do web form sample. So this is where I used Copilot to implement this. I created this plan, and then I said, okay, I want a front end and a back end, and it proxies everything through. So if we look at our end example, web form sample. Yeah, so there's that. It's basically not super impressive compared to what Jeff built. I built a page that's like, I am here, and it's like just stupid text. Jeff's gone through and actually completely re-implemented this stuff. It's not something that I'm going to go through and do in 5 minutes and it's going to work, but it's something that you can realistically like get through. He's tested through, like Contoso. It's not trivial. It's got, a decent amount of code in there. And so anyways, that's what I highly recommend, moving to Blazor web components. And so that's what I would do there. Yeah.
I'm a little unclear why Copilot can't do that. You got the instructions.
Yeah, it's a good question. It absolutely could. It's not a tested path. It's also, what are you going to rewrite it to? You know what I mean? So like, if I've got a web forms component, are you going to rewrite it to, if you're going to rewrite it to Blazor, it could do that, but it's going to take some effort to get there. And so what Jeff's done is basically created these mirror components that are super easy. You know what I mean? It's a much more like simple step to say, update my entire app, and these things are very, very similar, as opposed to convert all these web forms pages, rewrite them in Blazor. That's actually kind of more difficult in some cases, right? Because Blazor is components, but it uses like say DI, and it uses, you know what I mean? It's like, there's some different patterns there. What's that? Yeah, so you could do it. I'm just saying the amount of time it's going to take, and the amount of effort is, it's conceptually possible. It's just it's going to be riskier and longer to run. Now, of course, AI keeps getting better. It's likely it could happen. I don't know. I'm just saying, like, if I was doing a project like this, I would still, even if you don't long-term want to be on Jeff's, Blazor web form components, I would use that as an intermediate step. Because once you've got your app running, compiling, everything's in .NET 10 on Blazor components, then you can say, like, I don't like the way these components work. Rewrite this component. Like, that's trivial, right? The harder work is the mapping, and it's saying, like, and it's also even like, I don't know, like how much are these models trained on web forms? And you know what I mean? How good are the docs? And if things get stuck, it's like a whole treasure hunt sort of thing, So there's different ways to do everything. You probably would have some decent luck, I don't know. CLI, important. Reason is, I've been showing you Visual Studio. VS 2026 is great, and it's also not the best thing always everywhere, right? There's some teams that now are working a lot in VS Code, or are on, want to run things in CI, or they're on Macs or whatever, right? So that is what this is. So this is the Copilot CLI. They built an agent, a modernized agent for this. So I have another demo. This one is kind of less likely to work, but we'll give it a shot. So they have, and I'll share where all this stuff is at. They have some much more complex, larger things that they have tested more, but they have this app that's a J2E front end and ASMX back end with .NET framework, and like Java and .NET and all these kind of older things, and they've like gotten all that stuff to work.
What's your expectation of cost to update?
Great question. It really depends on your models that you pick. So I'm using like Opus 4.6. There are a lot of less expensive models, and they can just take more time, right? That is a really good, I don't have like a dollar figure amount. I do know that a lot of these plans come with a certain number of requests a month. So it's like, you're not actually paying per token, you're paying, so you know what I mean? You're gonna run out of whatever your token cost is. But I would take a look too at, you can, potentially like change around which models you're using for different things too. Okay, so let's go in here. Let's take a look at this. So I'm going to say, I've previously installed this Copilot agent. I'll show you how to do that in a second. So if I say Copilot, let's do -- banner, because of course. All right, so it's going to start up. Yay. Okay, so if I say, CWD, or actually here, I want to get onto my, okay. I want to get on my Q drive, CD source, CD MVC framework. Okay, this is just a basic file new .NET Framework MVC app. So now I'm going to say Copilot. Okay, I've installed this agent. The way I did that is with this post. This is on the .NET blog. It just came out like 2 days ago. And so the steps are here. It's basically you add the plugin marketplace, you do plugin install, and then you can say agent. So they have this kind of marketplace plugin way of extending things. So now I'm going to say, do I trust this folder? Yes. And then I want to say agent / agent. And I want to use the modernized.net agent. And they have other agents. They have like a test agent. They have a WinForms agent. So they have other stuff used. So I'll say update this to .NET 10. And I think on this, I'm on Opus 4.6 high, and I'm going to say /YOLO because it's fun. So now I've approved everything. It's on its own. Who knows what it'll do? Okay, so it's just going to go through and do stuff. Now, I'm showing the fast because I've only got a few minutes left, but you can, of course, like normally it'll ask for permissions. Hey, can I update this? Blah, blah, blah. So it's going through, figuring stuff out. So this is that same system that they built into Visual Studio 2026, and this is as an agent in Copilot CLI. So anyone here using Copilot CLI much? Yeah. I use it a lot. I get to work with the team a decent amount, and it's crazy their velocity, like how they ship several builds a week. They just keep adding crazy new stuff in, so it's pretty cool. Okay, so it's just gonna go through and do its thing. I think I could do like 10. I forget what it is. There's like a way you can go through and say like I want to get a nicer display where it'll actually like give you more of a status thing. If I do like migrate, update, I forget. There's a way you can get like a fancy display, but I don't remember what it is. So it's doing that thing. So this actually is a simpler problem, and I wouldn't be surprised if it actually solves this, in the next few minutes. I think we're going to give up on this guy. I think this guy kind of bombed out. So, which is a little sad because it worked in my hotel room like they do. So, it's got all the tasks planned, 0%. So, try harder, do better. Okay. Once you've got your code modernized, it's a lot easier to move to Azure. So we have some tools for doing that, including like build, CV, etc. It's a similar sort of experience. It goes through, you do, so it's a migrate to Azure, and it'll go through and it'll say, hey, I notice you've got this, you've got a SQL Server database. I recommend putting this on Azure SQL, and we'll recommend this and that. And you can go through and say, no, I want to do this, and you can edit your plan and then run it. What's nice with that is it's able to kind of figure out that sometimes moving things to Azure, you've got to like bring in always, you're going to need to bring in new packages and you're going to have to write some code to do that, right? New client libraries and things, and so it can handle that for you. So there's a migration guide on doing that, also from Mika. Mika writes a lot of cool stuff, and she's a PM on this. Another kind of thing I hear people ask about is, okay, I have a web app, but I can't move to Azure because I need registry access, or I have these weird DLLs or whatever. So a lot of common things there, file system access, that sort of thing. So this is specific to not just updating, but then it's like, now I want to cloudify. So this is this thing called managed instance on Azure. So Azure App Service, it's basically a way where you are running in Azure App Service, but you have things like registry access, file system access, like you can go through and configure all that sort of stuff. So just mentioning that because that's likely something that applies to many of you folks. Another important thing here, so this is our friends on the global black belt community have built this whole workshop on .NET app modernization with GitHub Copilot. So this is like, I tried to do the, hey, how much stuff can we do in 75 minutes? Some of it works, some doesn't. This is like more professional quality, like walking through. Yeah, do please grab the QR code, and that'll just take you to that repo. This walks you through beginning to end. Here's what you're actually doing. Here's what it means. Here's, you know what I mean? So this is the kind of like professional way of like, hey, I like what John was trying to do. Let's do this for real. Then this is kind of a good next step there. But one other question, I know we always get, what about Upgrade Assistant? I can't use Copilot in my business for whatever reason. So Upgrade Assistant now, if you right-click on a project, you don't get the Modernize with Upgrade Assistant anymore. And that's because we really are recommending that people use the Copilot solution. It really works a lot better. But if you are blocked, you can go into your options and you can just type in Upgrade Assistant. And it'll take you to this checkbox and you can enable that. So that is a workaround if you're stuck. I'm at time. Thanks much.